You know, there's that old saying, what goes around comes around. And boy, does it feel like it was written for the story of Ellen DeGeneres. For decades, she built this massive, global brand on just one thing: kindness. She was one of the most loved people on the planet. But, as we'd all find out, there was a completely different story brewing behind the scenes. A story that would eventually tear down the very empire she built.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? How on earth did the person who ended every single show telling millions of us to be kind to one another end up at the center of a massive scandal about being, well, the opposite of kind? It's a wild story about a public image versus a private reality, and what happens when those two worlds collide.
So to really get how it all fell apart, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to look at how she built this thing. Because Ellen didn't just get famous. No, she carefully constructed an entire empire on the simple, powerful idea of being nice. Her career has been a total roller coaster. You can see it right here. She starts out as a hugely successful comedian, gets her own sitcom, then in 1997, she changes television forever with the puppy episode. She comes out as gay both on the show and in real life. But the backlash was intense. The show got canceled, and she was pretty much blacklisted. But then, her big comeback, voicing Dory in Finding Nemo. And this was genius. It completely softened her image, made her beloved by families everywhere, and it set the stage perfectly for her to launch a talk show built on pure, unwavering positivity. And that talk show was designed to be an escape. I mean, think about it. Daytime TV back then was full of people yelling at each other. Ellen's show was the total opposite. It was fun, it was light, there was dancing, it was just happy. And her famous sign-off, "Be kind to one another," that wasn't just a tagline, that was the brand. People tuned in every day for their dose of feel-good TV. And she really leaned into this image. She didn't just talk about being kind. She performed these huge acts of generosity. Like the time she gave away $1 million to her studio audience. $1 million! Moments like that are what cemented her title as the undisputed Queen of Nice. But even at the absolute height of her fame, whispers were starting to get louder. Whispers that told a very, very different story.
So the downfall didn't happen overnight. It was more like a series of small cracks appearing in this perfectly polished image she had. For the first time, people who actually worked with her started hinting that the Ellen they knew was not the Ellen we saw on our screens.
This quote right here was one of the first real public signs of trouble. It came out during the 2007 writers' strike, where Ellen famously crossed the picket line to keep her show on the air. A former writer described this chilling transformation. The moment the director yelled "cut," the happy, smiling Ellen would just vanish, replaced by this cold, intimidating boss. It was the first time a lot of us started to wonder, wait, is this all an act?
And then we started seeing weird moments of meanness actually happen on camera. Take this so-called gift shop incident. She sets up this test for her audience with free stuff, but a strict take only one rule. Well, one woman took two things, so Ellen brings her up on stage, publicly shames her, and then sends her to a fake Ellen jail. It was meant to be funny, but it just came across as cruel. And for a lot of viewers, that was the moment they saw the Be Kind mask slip live on TV. And this is really where that disconnect becomes impossible to ignore. On one hand, you have Ellen on camera saying all she wants is a happy workplace, but on the other hand, you have headlines like this from major outlets flat out saying she isn't who you think she is. This tension was just building and building, and it was about to explode.
Okay, so this is the moment the whispers turned into a full-blown roar. In the summer of 2020, BuzzFeed News dropped a bombshell report. They'd spoken to over 10 former and current employees, and the story they told was about to completely shatter Ellen's public image.
The allegations were just stunning. Former staff members said her "Be Kind" motto was, and I'm quoting here, "bullshit that only happens when the cameras are on." They talked about a culture of fear, where you were literally told not to speak to Ellen. There were allegations of racism from top producers, of being micromanaged down to your bathroom breaks, and this overwhelming feeling that everyone was just walking on eggshells. It was the exact opposite of the happy, kind place she sold to the world.
And maybe one of the most damning details was this quote. A producer told a story about a top executive screaming at a staff member. And instead of intervening, Ellen supposedly just laughed and said, "Every production needs their dog." The implication was chilling. This person was her attack dog, doing the dirty work to enforce that culture of fear so she could keep her hands clean.
So with all this public outrage, Ellen had to respond. She sent a memo to her staff, and in it she said she was sorry, but a lot of people felt like she was just shifting the blame. She said she was disappointed that things had changed and that she had to rely on other people who basically didn't do their jobs right. It came across less like an apology and more like, hey, it wasn't really my fault.
Yeah, that apology did not go over well. The damage was done, so now we get to the fallout, the end of the show and a series of public appearances from Ellen that, to many, just seemed defensive and completely unapologetic.
And the impact on her audience was immediate. Just look at these numbers. This show lost over 1 million viewers. In daytime TV, that is an absolute catastrophe. The brand was broken, people were tuning out, and it wasn't long before she announced that the show was coming to an end.
Even as the show was ending, this huge gap between how she saw herself and how others saw her just got wider. In interviews, she would insist, "I am a kind person." But then you'd hear from an audience member who said, no, she was totally different. The second the camera stopped rolling, she wouldn't even look at them.
Instead of really owning the situation, she started to suggest that this whole thing was an attack on her. She claimed it was all too orchestrated, too coordinated. Essentially, she was painting herself as the victim of a targeted takedown, not as the leader of a workplace with serious problems.
She also tried to use what's called plausible deniability. Her argument was basically, hey, how could I possibly know what was going on? I have 255 employees. She said she delegated responsibility, so it wasn't her fault if she didn't know. But the counter-argument was pretty simple. Ellen, your name is on the building. The buck stops with you.
And that brings us to this quote from her 2024 comedy special. It's really the final defiant chapter. The Queen of Nice is just gone. She's basically saying her biggest mistake was being too nice. It was a shocking, full-throated rejection of the very idea that made her famous. And for many, it was the final confirmation that the kindness was never real to begin with.
So what's her legacy now? By throwing away the be kind persona so completely, she pretty much confirmed what her critics had been saying for years, that it was all an act. Of course, her historical importance as a gay icon is undeniable. But now, that legacy is tangled up with one of the biggest and most spectacular celebrity implosions we've ever seen.
And really, it leaves us with this final thought. Ellen DeGeneres built an entire world on one single idea, but her story has become this massive cautionary tale. It's about the danger of building your entire identity on a standard that maybe no one, not even you, can live up to. Because when your entire brand is kindness, what's actually left when the kindness is gone?